Welcome in today. We have a lot to cover. It's day 13 of Operation Epic Fury. I am still on the road. And ironically enough, I actually flew just north of Iran yesterday, about 80 miles north. Just kind of surreal when you look out the window, know what's transpiring just a couple hundred miles south of your flight path there. Now, we do have a lot to go into. The first being what appears to be a GBU-57, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator that the United States first used during Operation Midnight Hammer. That's a 30,000-pound bomb, just absolutely massive. And now it's being reported that it was potentially used just yesterday against additional Iranian nuclear sites. Airport hits the Strait of Hormuz, which appears to be just in utter chaos. We have oil tankers that have been hit, oil refinery facilities have been hit in the Gulf states. We have pictures of crew members floating in life rafts. And this all ties into the regime and what is going on. Is the regime digging in? Are they more hardened given the fact that they've been struck? What's happening with the new Ayatollah? These are all questions that we're going to dive in today. But first, I want to go to that GBU-57, or that potential GBU-57 that was utilized just yesterday. Now, this is a massive explosion. Just look at this mushroom cloud building here. Anything just shy of a nuclear weapon. I have seen GBU-31s, 2,000-pound bombs drop on oil refineries. And maybe outside of a nuclear weapon, that's probably the only mushroom cloud that I've seen that is comparable to this. We'll watch it one more time just so you can kind of compare it to the buildings. We don't know how large that hill or mountain is off to the side, but this is large. The cameraman obviously held it on there. Kind of interesting of how the cameraman knew to look there. Now, we do know that there are 3 of these type ordnance that were dropped as we look at the imagery here, which the war zone reported on. And this imagery is coming from a company called Vantor. So potentially this was the 3rd or 2nd strike that gave the cameraman a heads up to look in this direction. Or maybe he was just lucky, probably more lucky that he wasn't anywhere near it. But this is the Parchin military complex. It's about 20-30 miles southeast of Tehran. And this site specifically is called the Taliban 2 inside this complex. And it's been on the International Atomic Energy Agency's radar for quite some time now. Suspected of producing specialized conventional explosives, rocket motors, all in the name and the effort for nuclear weapon development. A lot of pieces coming together in this puzzle. Obviously, Iran has constantly denied this existed or that's what they're doing. Now, the Israelis struck Parchin back in 2024, and they hit it again in the 12-day war in 2025. Both times, Iran rebuilt. Now, at some point, you got to figure either the damage wasn't so significant that it was easy to rebuild, or maybe we move our stuff to a different location. Now, the weapon in question, that GBU-57, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, looking at these impact points, they look comparable or on par with those that were assessed following the strikes in Operation Midnight Hammer in Fordo and Natanz. CENTCOM has not commented on this yet, so it's not confirmed. To give you a sense of the scale of this weapon, an F-16 that's fully combat loaded weighs 42,000 pounds. If we look at this picture of a B-52, which is dropping a GBU-57A, this is a variant that's been tested and approved on the B-52. Just look at the chase plane there and the size. Now, granted, there is some distance between the two, so not entirely accurate, but again, we compare it to someone standing next to it. This thing is just absolutely massive. Now, it can penetrate reinforced concrete upwards of 200 feet buried in the mountainside. Absolutely wild. Now, this was certified to be carried on the B-2. I am sure the United States Air Force, if they wanted to, could quickly certify this, more or less quickly certify this on a B-52. And I would expect it to be certified on the B-21 or the next variant. But the B-2 can carry 2 of these. Now, in the months before the conflict started, Iran encased this facility with new concrete and piled more soil on top of it, I guess thinking that it couldn't happen again. Now, we have recently seen B-1s being loaded, and I would say very publicly, with bunker buster bombs. These are GBU-31 munitions. But again, just giving the scale of this mushroom cloud and then knowing how Iran has supposedly fortified this facility, that's why it does seem rather possible that GBU-57s were once again used in this strike versus a 2,000-pound class weapon. Now, strikes have continued to ramp up across CENTCOM now saying that over 6,000 targets have been hit. And now we have footage of C-130s, P-3s of the Iranian Air Force being struck and hit. Now, this is a P-3F variant of the Orion from the early 1970s. 6 P-3s were delivered to the Iranian Air Force between 1974 and 1975. Additionally, we saw C-130s that entered service in the Iranian Air Force starting in 1963, and they bought about 50 of these from what we can tell. Additionally, we have now confirmed reports of F-14s that have been destroyed at Khatami Air Base. There's been pictures of painted silhouettes of F-14s that have been bombed. So now I think we can say that we have seen F-14s, the remaining ones they've had have been destroyed. But here's the piece too. We now are fully seeing the chaos that is unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf and everything in between. Obviously the videos coming out of the Gulf states of civilian targets being attacked has been quite dramatic, but now ships have been hit. Potentially underwater drones or just small vessels, unmanned vessels that were laden with explosives have struck numerous oil tankers in the region, with crews now floating in the sea being rescued, with again dramatic footage of crews floating in rafts waiting to be rescued. So unconfirmed what made this strike happen, but regardless, it shows the problem set that's here. This is one of Iran's underwater drones. I mean, basically a torpedo that doesn't have to be launched from a ship, a submarine, an airplane, just dropped in the water. Now, obviously not super fast, but you can imagine the problem set this creates. We obviously have the reports coming out about Iran laying mines, and we've gone after those mine-laying ships. But again, this just changes the calculus to a degree that creates so much chaos in my mind. But here's the thing, what happens next? We've heard President Trump saying basically the war is over. We've decimated everything in Iran when it comes to the military. But on the flip side, we see the Iranian regime, at least reports coming out that they are digging in. They are more hardened than ever. So I would like to take a look around and show you what I have seen thus far. And it raises a couple questions. But the first is this, Mujtaba Khamenei. Again, probably butchering his name. That'll be okay. But his father was killed in the airstrike, and then supposedly most of his family, including his wife, his mother, he appears to have injured in the airstrike, or at least an assassination attempt. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can imagine that if most of your family was killed in an airstrike, you're probably not just going to lay down your arms and say, that's okay, I capitulate. I would envision that if he is still alive, he is going to be digging in even harder. And it might not be right away, but that's just kind of a pure guess on my part. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. But we have Iran's police chief saying that if anyone goes out and protests against the regime, they will be shot. They'll be treated as the enemy. He goes on to say, from this point on, if anyone comes into the streets at the enemy's request, we will no longer see them as protesters. We will see them as enemies. And we will do to them what we do to our enemies. We will treat them the way we treat enemies. All of our men have their fingers on the trigger and are ready to defend their revolution, to support of their people and their homeland. We will sacrifice our lives for our homeland, for our people. And then we have undated footage, and it appears to be regime supporters. Again, perspective-wise, when was this taken? How many people are there? Where was this? You could ask it of both sides when we see pro and against regime, but nonetheless. So this just paints the picture. There's a lot of information flying around on both sides, but this is the commander of U.S. European Command and Supreme Allied Commander Europe. And this is what he said today in the Senate Armed Services Committee.
In the war, and what I've observed over the course of studying air power in history is that anytime you attack a civilian population, you usually end up finding that it just hardens their resolve. We take this all the way back to the London Blitz in World War II.
Right.
The Brits just had a stiff upper lip and kept on fighting. And I think that's what we've seen in Ukraine as well.
Obviously, this is complex. It's not going to resolve itself overnight. I'd be curious to hear your comments down below, and I'll see you next time.